Welcome back. In the last step of this section, let's talk about the most important question: Hibernate versus JPA. What is Hibernate? What is JPA? What is the difference between them? We have explored JPA a lot in the last few steps. We saw that JPA makes talking to the database very, very easy. Let's look at the imports which we made use of in the course JPA repository. So let's open up course JPA repository. Let's look at the imports. Jakarta persistence, Jakarta persistence, Jakarta persistence. Let's go to our course. What is the annotation that we are making use of? Jakarta persistence entity, Jakarta persistence ID. In this section until now, we did not make use of Hibernate annotations at all. Let's go over to our Maven dependencies. And if you expand the Maven dependencies, you should see Jakarta persistence API 3.0.0 jar. This is the JPA jar. You would also see Hibernate jars in here. You can scroll up and type in HIB, Hibernate core Jakarta. You can see that Hibernate is also in the class path. Now, how are the Hibernate and JPA dependencies coming in? If you open up the pom.xml, you should see something called Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. Let's go over to dependency hierarchy in here. And over here, type in Hibernate. You can see that there are a couple of Hibernate dependencies which are coming into Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. Now let's search for Java. Let's search for JPA. That's Jakarta.persistence.api. How is the Jakarta persistence API or JPA coming in? You can see that it's coming into. You can see that it's coming in through Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. So in our pom.xml, we are getting both JPA and Hibernate. However, in our code, we are only making use of JPA. We made use of only JPA annotations. So with that context, what is the difference between Hibernate and JPA? JPA defines a specification. It is an API. JPA is like an interface. It defines how you can define an entities. The way you can define an entity is by adding an @entity annotation. So in the course.java, we made use of @entity, Jakarta persistence entity. So we are using the JPA API. How do you define a primary key? You make use of Jakarta persistence ID. How do you map attributes? We talked about annotations like @column. So if you look at @column annotation, where is it coming from? Jakarta persistence API. So JPA allows you to define entities, map attributes, and also do things using the entity manager. It defines the methods which are exposed on the entity manager, for example. And Hibernate is one of the most popular implementations of JPA. So JPA defines the API. JPA defines how you can map your objects to tables, and Hibernate implements that. Hibernate is the most popular implementation of JPA. In our code, you have the option of directly using Hibernate. How can I directly use Hibernate? By making use of Hibernate annotations. For example, if I go to entity and do a control space or command space, you would see that there is Jakarta persistence entity and there is also org Hibernate annotations entity. If you are making use of org Hibernate annotations entity, then you are making use of Hibernate directly. However, what we are doing, we are not making use of Hibernate directly. We are making use of JPA. And by adding Hibernate jar to our class path, we are making use of Hibernate as the implementation of the JPA. The reason why we avoid using Hibernate annotations directly in code is because we don't want to lock into Hibernate. There are other JPA implementations that are available. One of the other alternatives is something called top link. So the most important takeaway from this step is that JPA is an API. It defines a specification. It defines how to map entities, how to map attributes, how to make use of the entity manager. In your code, it is always recommended to make use of JPA. Once you have JPA used in your code, you can use Hibernate as the implementation of JPA. I'm sure you're having a great time, and I'll see you in the next step. I'm sure you had a great time watching this video. Think about this for a minute. What are the different things you should learn to be a great Spring and Spring Boot developer? The fundamentals of Spring Framework, Spring Boot, Hibernate JPA, and various Spring modules out there. And learning to build variety of applications, a web application, a REST API, maybe a full stack application with React. In addition, you'd also want to learn unit testing. And after that, you'd want to learn how to containerize all these kind of applications with Docker. And how about deploying these applications to the cloud? Let's pick up AWS, the #1 cloud platform today. Do you think this is a great roadmap for Java learners to follow? What if you can learn all these things in just one course? Yep, that's true. All these in just one course. Wouldn't it be awesome? Wouldn't it be a dream come true? Thousands of learners are already learning from this amazing course. You can join them right now. You can find a link to the course on our website, www.in28minutes.com. Keep learning every day. Keep learning in 28 minutes. Until I see you again, here's bye from Ranga at In 28 Minutes.